Hi, my name is Lars Helgeson. I am the founder and CEO of Green Rope, and today we're going to talk about customer-centric entrepreneurship. So I always like to start first by really defining about what we're really talking about. What does customer-centric really mean? You'll hear a lot of people talk in the industry about how important the customer is, but when we talk about customer-centric, what we mean is that the primary driver for our decision-making relies on the customer. So that means that when we're designing our products and services, when we're managing the relationships between our business and our customers, we put the customer first. And it's not just lip service, we actually do it. So when we build a business, especially in the really early stages, providing that high quality customer service experience is really important for the growth and success of that business. As you know, many startups don't perform very well. Oftentimes, the most cited issue is cash flow, but a big part of being able to grow and scale really relies on our ability to identify who the customer is, solve something that's very specific that they need in a way that is easy for them to be able to digest what it is that we're giving to them. So to be customer centric, we have to know who our customer is. And that's a really important part of any business model. Most of you who are at some stage of either considering or building a business should have a clear idea of who you're selling your product to. The concept of if you build it, they will come is a very risky prospect, especially in the modern era when there's so much technology available to so many people. It's highly competitive. You really want to make sure that you identify your customer very early on and think about who you're actually selling to. The next part of that is what value you offer. So obviously, once you know who your customer is, you need to be able to identify what it is you're actually solving for them. And oftentimes this boils down to time or money. So helping them do something, whether it's a machine or software or a service, you're providing a way to make their lives easier or better. And so how do you do that? Oftentimes it comes down to saving people money, helping them make money, or saving people time, doing things to help them run their business more efficiently. All of these are encapsulated in what it is that the value that you're bringing to your customer. You may hear the acronym USP, unique service proposition, where you're providing something special. What is it that you are providing special to that customer? And then finally, how do you measure your performance? How do you make sure that what you're actually doing is valuable to your customer? So more than just saying we sold 10 units, how do you know that your customers are happy with what it is that you're providing? And part of that will extend through the life of their usage of your product or service. So these are all questions that you have to answer early on in the business planning phase of your startup. The two big statements that you'll hear people talking about when you are building your business is your mission statement and your vision statement. The mission statement really defines why you're there. So you think about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Why is that important to you? Why is that important to your customer? What are your goals? And who, of course, is your customer? So all of those things are encapsulated in the mission statement. The vision statement is more of a far-reaching strategy that you want to be able to share with your team. It's mostly for internal purposes, but the idea is to have a vision of where you want to go with the business. And a lot of times this is tied to an emotion, whether it's you're creating freedom, happiness, finding a way to encapsulate what it is that you want to accomplish in an emotional state. And oftentimes it's idealistic. It may be impossible for you if you were a nonprofit that you were trying to feed a lot of people. You're never going to solve world hunger, but you may be able to make a lasting, wide-ranging impact with a lot of people. And so you want to think about how do you encapsulate that vision, that long-term vision, in an emotional state, in an emotional way that identifies what you're trying to accomplish. So part of understanding customer-centric entrepreneurship is really understanding our target market. So again, who is our customer? And these come in two different types. You've got a demographic and you have a behavioral. So demographics really are about things that are fairly static, things like someone's age, someone's gender, someone's interests, even where they live, even though that may change. The idea of demographics is really based on understanding who this person is in terms of relatively static elements of who they are. The other part, behavioral, is looking at what they do. And so this can be a little bit harder to track, and it can also be, it can change a lot. But behavioral understanding is looking at things like buying behavior. Where do they go to purchase things? So when you're looking at targeting these people, it's really important to understand how do they behave. So when they want to learn about a product like yours, where do they go to do that? So understanding your target market really is about understanding both of these things. So you're really looking at the demographics, and we'll talk more about these kinds of what these elements can be, but things that are generally static, and behavioral, which are more about what people are actually doing in relation to how they are going to learn and purchase your product or service. The second part on this slide is talking about buyer personas. Buyer personas are a way for you to create a visual, emotional representation of who your buyer is. So the emotional part is very important, because there's that expression, walk a mile in someone's shoes to truly understand them. Or I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the idea of understanding who this person is by creating a representation of who they are. So this is so that you can put yourself in the shoes of this potential buyer from you, and understand where do they get their information and how are they going to decide to use your product or service. Buyer personas are very important, because even though they're an oversimplification of who people are, it's a way for you to identify with who those people potentially could be that are going to be buying your products or services. So these are examples of buyer persona traits, and you'll see some of this is a mixture of demographics and a mixture of the behavioral. So what you like to do when you create a buyer persona is give them a name, and it can be any name that you want. But the idea is that you want to put yourself, you want to connect with this persona, this sort of fake caricature of a person. Give an estimate of how old they are, where do they live, what kind of job do they have, what kind of car do they drive, what do they do when they're not working, and what's important to them. And so you can see this is a mix of all those elements of behavioral and demographic, but it's going to create a concept for you to wrap your head around, so that you can say this particular person. For example, in our company, we're a software company. Sometimes we sell to people in sales, sometimes we sell to marketing managers, and sometimes we sell to the CIO or the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer. If we were looking at someone who is very highly IT focused, in our case, we have a persona that we call him IT Eddie. And so IT Eddie is what you would imagine an IT manager would look like. And so we have a little caricature of him, and we have an estimated age, job description, where does he live, does he have children, things like that. So we create this representation of this person, and then we think, okay, how are we going to sell this to IT Eddie? What message does that have to be, and how is that different than selling to, say, the person that's in charge of the sales team? So this is how we're able to think more emotionally about what it is that we're selling. Once we have an understanding of all of those elements of who we're selling to, we now want to think about our customer journeys. So a customer journey is simply a rough estimation of how someone is going to go through the buying process when they learn about your product or service, decide that it's something that they're really going to want to use, and then decide that they're going to pay you, and then engage with you as a customer. So when we look at this journey, we're looking at all of those elements of the process of them buying from you. And then once they consume your product or service, making sure that we have a way to turn them into advocates for your brand, to be able to help you scale and bring on more customers. So a customer journey map is very much a strategic exercise where you as a business owner or leader in your business are taking a step back and thinking about what this process looks like. Does your buyer journey look different based on who you're selling to? So if you have the different personas that you create, maybe someone is a younger male versus an older female versus living in the suburbs versus living urban. Are they going to different places to find their information? Is their decision making different? Are they looking at different products or services that you're able to offer them? When you look through this customer journey map, you really want to look at what are the emotional stages where someone is going through and learning about your product or your service. You want to think about, how do you want to make them feel? So you have your brand, which represents what you're selling, and you want to connect that to each of these personas. So your message is going to be a little bit different every time you do communicate to a different kind of a persona. And again, recognize that these are very gross estimations. They're to help you carve out and craft your messaging and personalize it based on who you're selling to, but knowing that there's going to be a little bit of variability, obviously, in different people and how they act and what they relate to. So the customer journey map allows you to, at a strategic level, take this step back and think about, how can I sell to each of my buyer personas? How am I going to interact with them? And how am I going to move them through the process of selling them my product or service? Here's a simple example where you can take a look at a very high level how a potential client can go through this process. So maybe they, and we can step through here just as an example, did they come from a social media campaign? And if they did, or maybe you'll send them an email with a social media ebook. So, something that's specific that, they came, say, from Facebook. Maybe you have different ads that are running on Facebook. Maybe Facebook is a little bit more of a personal experience. And so you're going to send them information about it. And then you're going to send them, so maybe they receive this email. Did they click on a link? If they do, maybe you schedule a phone call for one of your sales reps to follow up. If they don't, maybe you just ignore them, or maybe you do something else. Maybe you put them into a newsletter, an email newsletter list, or whatever you would want to do. The idea here is that you map out the whole process. You think about, how do each of your buyer personas move through this stage? And then as you visualize this process, you think about, how do we capture people to make sure that we don't lose them? The example here, where if you were to just say, oh, we give up if they don't click on a link, may not be a good approach if you want to make sure you want to convert as many people as possible. So maybe that means they go into a long lead time type of a sales funnel, where maybe they get an email every month, or they get on your new email newsletter list, or you try to add them to different social media, whatever it is that you're going to do. You want to create a way to anticipate how each of your buyer personas are going to move through this. Now, there are lots of tools out there. This was built with a tool called Journey Flow, but there are lots of different methods out there that you can use. Even if you use Post-it notes and you put them on a whiteboard and you kind of imagine how someone is going to move through this process. But you want to create this map so that you understand and you can visualize how someone is going to move through the process of learning about you, deciding they want to become a customer, becoming a customer, and then how do you engage with them to make sure that they become advocates of your brand and tell other people about how great you are. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope you learned a little bit about customer-centric entrepreneurship. I'm available if you need any help or have any questions. Reach out to me at any time. I'm on, especially on LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm happy to be a resource for you.